Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Instead of Tank of the Week, we are going to be doing a Onslaught tanks guide for you guys. I know a lot of you in this Discord play Onslaught at various different levels. We've got a lot of, Legends champs and, the majority of people in that kind of range of silver to gold. And this is kind of our advice if we were you on how you could have the most impact in your game and, try to achieve the highest rank possible that you can. So first things first, we want to talk about what tanks should be played. And also, I think at a higher level, this should include what kind of matchup you're in. So if you actually look at who's on your team, you should be able to tell in general what kind of lobby you're in. So, for example, if you're in silver and you see your team is full of silvers and bronzes, then you're probably just in a silver and bronze lobby, right? You don't need to worry about there being very high level players. And we'll explain a little more as to why that's important later. Um, but I guess, how should we start from the bottom or should we start from the top? I think it would
We
make more
should start
sense.
from the bottom.
Okay. So starting from the bottom at bronze, these are our kind of general meta tanks in Onslaught. Um, and this arrow is indicating which ones are the most difficult to play. Not saying which ones are the least useful. Well, I guess it actually kind of is, depending on what rank you are. But in general, the first tank we have is the 60 DP, which a lot of you are going to be very familiar with. So this is kind of your all-around heavy tank that is going to be the best for brawling, holding positions, and also it's kind of the most common one everybody has. On some maps, I think you could argue that it's interchangeable with, tanks like the 705A or maybe like a mouse. But when we talk about those kind of tanks, we're definitely not including tanks like a 257 heavy. We're talking about tanks that are genuine heavies and actually have armor. Are there any other tanks you think we'd include in that list?
Mouse 60p 75A. You
Maybe
could
like
bring
an
an
E100,
E100.
yeah, because at the lower ranks especially, it's probably uncommon for you to have all the heavy tanks available. Um, but yeah, that's your kind of most common tank that you're gonna see
User joined your
very
channel.
frequently.
These are like
John went
your
busy.
fat heavy tanks. Thank you.
User in your channel was kicked.
These are the most common heavy tanks you're gonna see that are present on every single map in those holding positions or even going towards the fight. And then the next category we have is kind of your more breakthrough heavy tanks. So these are tanks that are going to be better for taking early positions, also still having some armor. A lot of the times you'll even see these tanks being played on the offside, like an IS-7 277. Um, if you're comfortable playing these tanks, I think they can be really powerful because of the nature of its speed and the fact that, if you're fighting mediums in this tank, normally if you're able to use your hit points and your armor to help your mediums fight, then this tank can be super powerful because obviously you've got more health, and it's a lot harder to pen these tanks when you're playing in like an E50M or a Batchat versus fighting other Batchats and E50Ms. So this tank, I7 is probably the best one. 277, that's going to be your next kind of more unique role style tank, like the one that's a little less obvious, I'd say, in where it goes. And then I guess Hockey, this is your specialty here on our next category. So why don't you talk us through the power of the medium, these kinds of mediums and what they do?
Well, those two medium tanks, the 430U, D50M, they've got this ability. It makes them shoot really fast with really high accuracy. And it's if you're in a brawl, it's pretty easy to keep that ability on. So those are tanks that you want to be playing the offside with or baiting off of your team. Not necessarily baiting, but you want to be the last one alive if shit's going down. You
Yeah,
don't
if
want to
there's
be
like
dying
a
first.
yeah, 100%. If there's like a big brawl, you don't want to be taking any part of that first volley, or maybe you want to take like one shot max. Let's say it's like, five tanks versus five tanks. You definitely want to wait for them all to fire and then kind of find an opportunity to maybe isolate one of them and find a good position where, these tanks also have great hold down and side screen abilities and kind of just work down those heavies that have effectively when you got your ability on like what three times your reload for a 60 TP, right? You got like a
Yep,
4 second reload on a
close to that.
430
hmm
and then 15, 13 seconds in your 60 even with his ability. So these tanks can be super powerful as well, but obviously as we go further down this list, they're harder and harder to play. The other reason why is once you have the ability on, it's great, but if you do miss a few shots, you're going to lose the ability. And then the gun handling of the 430U isn't amazing outside of its ability mode. And then on some maps also, knowing that the 430U is AP and heat, a lot of times you'll be shooting gold and there's a lot of fences and stuff, so it can just be a little more difficult to play. Also doesn't have a ton of gun depression, but if played properly, that tank can do some crazy, crazy numbers.
It's also way squishier than your 60 TP, your IA7. You
Right.
don't have as many hit points. You make a bad trade, there goes your half your tank, right?
And it's really, really important to keep your HP in those tanks, whereas it's a little more forgiving to lose your HP in the tanks that eventually you plan to lose your HP on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next category, which is, I would say, even more difficult to play, and the reason why I would say tanks like the V4 or the Blisk, or any of those kind of, or tanks like the Foch B, any of those TDs that you see that people are using to push out flanks or to try and change the game, is because for most people, that's a really complicated thing to understand and utilize all the kind of different situations and information you have in Onslaught. For me personally, that's why I love playing this mode. Is every game, well, you'll have games that are the same, but there's so many openings to make different plays in different ways to change the game. And in these kind of tanks, it's definitely a different role of its own. So if you don't have a lot of experience playing the mode, most of the time you're gonna be better off doing what you think you would be doing in these tanks in a 60 TP. So like most of the time, even if you're pushing out a flank or holding a flank, you might as well be in a tank that's hard to pen and a lot more comfier to play. And you've also got more hit points to trade yourself out with. But
And an important thing about these tanks is,
yeah,
especially the Foch B, you have to be aware of when you use your ability, because your ability is one of the most
yes,
powerful in the game. You you all the damage you take for however many seconds is essentially refunded to you, but you actually have to make sure you first that you survive the initial damage, and second that you have time to heal all that damage back, and third that you're not wasting that ability. If you pop it too early,
mm-hmm.
then you're in without an ability and you're taking all that damage.
Also find one of the most common things I see from fighters, I'm sure you see this a lot too, Hockey, is they'll push in and they'll get a good clip and get a good trade, but they'll be pushing into an area where they're going to be repushed and they don't have enough cover. And I think every person has felt that experience playing any autoloader, right? Obviously, when you're playing an autoloader, it's so satisfying to have that moment where you're in your clip and in the moment you're making a good trade. But I would say basically the more to the right on the scale we move through the tanks, you need to be able to predict what's going to happen further and further along in the game,
Yeah. You need to
right?
be more kind of aware of what's going on too.
Exactly. So I'll see a lot of Foch players, they drive in and yeah, they use their ability properly. Maybe they go 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6, even 6 out of 6, but then they get repushed and they die. And unfortunately, because of the increased hit points in Onslaught, most of the time that means you're not actually trading one
One
for
clip
one.
is not good enough.
Yeah, one clip is not good enough unless your entire team is there to cover you as you're getting repushed or you're getting
Yep.
traded out afterward. And then the other thing is, even if you do your whole clip, you're probably gonna leave somebody alive, and he's not like he's gonna be. He might be one strikeable depending on what kind of tank he plays, but he's still gonna be a pain in the ass. And if he's a smart player, he's gonna find a way to make his tank really useful and really hard, to secure that kill for your team. So that's the kind of the challenges of playing these kind of TDs. Super difficult, but obviously a lot of fun. But once again, it really depends on what your goal of playing Onslaught is. Fun versus winning is, you know,
Sometimes you have to pick one.
exactly. As you're gonna see in some replays later, like even for us as players who get legend every season and play tons and tons of games, there are games where we will go back to playing more on the left side of the scale instead of playing, a Bat Chat, an RHM, a Foch B or a V4, the tanks you commonly see people playing. And there's times where, sometimes just playing I7 drive or play 60 GP and trust your teammates to hold the offside. Sometimes your teammates are just bringing too many squishy tanks and they don't want to switch, and you're just gonna lose anyway if you bring six lights, like one light tank and six TVPs, right? So sometimes it's up to you to pivot roles. But that's something we'll review as we go through this list. The last two categories here are your medium tanks. And when we say medium tanks, we're really only talking about Bat Chat, the CS,
PvP.
TVP,
Yes.
Leo. And I'm not saying, I guess the one exception of this is like the CS on Mines. The CS on Mines is obviously just a very brawly thing, but we're talking about more using these mediums in a offside nature. So, Red Shire going towards the 9 line, I don't know, Sand River going north, any of those kind of things where the engagements are a lot more distant, and you really have to know where the enemies are. Otherwise, once again, you're going to be really unoptimized in your positioning and your gameplay and kind of slowly letting your team die. Because the one thing about playing the offside is if you're going to play, you need to play it as efficiently as possible. Otherwise, the other more common areas in the map, if you're not there, that means likely your weaker teammates are there, and they're probably going to eventually lose that flank. And yeah, we'll have an example of that in these games as well. And then the last tank is the light. And the light tank is very powerful because even though it got nerfed, you can still plane for a lot of information at the start of the game. You might not get all 7 on most maps, but you can check how much is going to one side of the map. Since a lot of the maps are kind of two-dimensional, like everybody either kind of goes towards this way or the other way, or they split, you can get an idea of, for example, on Merovanka, how many tanks might be going for us, or you at least see the nature in which they're driving for the first 10 seconds of the game and be like, okay, these guys are cutting straight towards the forest. Maybe I didn't hit the rest of them. It means they probably have a lot in the forest. And then you can analyze on your team how many people do we have there, and then so on and so on. Definitely the most difficult tank to play. Um, Easiest tank to die in. Easiest tank to
You don't have the best
to get
damage
1v1.
output.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of sweaty nerds running around in this tank, so you're probably going to be fighting the best players when you're playing this tank. So we'll talk a little more about how to deal with that depending on what rank you're at. So why don't we start with bronze? And I don't know, have you had a lot of experience playing bronze hockey?
I have had very little experience in bronze.
In the past seasons, I played a little bit, and I think um what I noticed for sure was number one, definitely with platoon in bronze. If you've got, once again, platooning for fun versus platooning to win. I'm sure everybody has their friend that's not great at World of Tanks, or whatever whatever perspective that is. But you like to play with your fun. If you're playing Onslaught, find a good teammate or don't
We're not
complain
we're
about
not
having
we're
no
not
points.
saying yeah, we're not saying don't platoon with them. We're just saying
Maybe not in this mode.
don't expect them to perform
Right,
well in this mode if they don't perform well in other modes.
right, exactly. So in bronze, I think definitely the most useful tanks are gonna be the 60 is definitely up there because it's just common through every single
Yep.
mode.
Number one, and it's
Yeah.
easiest to play.
I would say, I would actually say at bronze, your breakthrough heavies is
Yep.
probably not as important,
Heavy
actually.
tanks.
I would actually
Well,
put like playing DPM mediums if you can above that.
I imagine
Because,
it's more brawly.
yeah,
Everybody goes to the same spot and
exactly.
kind of fights it out.
Exactly. So then rather than playing, like, obviously the 430U and the E50M are going to have way more DPM than your i7 or 277. But once again, if that's a tank you're not comfortable in, but you still want to have some mobility to, take a crossfire angle or, control a certain section of the map, then i7, 277, great choices. Um, the V4 and the TD category,
Mm, I would say these last three are just in the order that they are.
yeah, I would
I don't.
say I would honestly stay very far away from them.
Yep.
Um,
All three of these classes.
because even though you may win some games because you're in them, Onslaught really is kind of like you need to look at what's happening over like 50, 60 games with you, right? Just
All
because you
about
had,
consistency.
yeah, exactly. Because a lot of players are like, they get addicted to playing the Batcha or the Foch or the RHM because they had a good game in it, and then they have 4 bad games in it, right? And also, it's sometimes hard to analyze whether or not it's your contribution versus your team being bad. And trust me, we've played so many games. There's so many games where your teams are terrible. But this mode really is about how can you deal with all those factors better than the people on the other team. Every team has bad players. There's going to be some games where you get wiped, and there's going to be some games where you wipe the other team. But that's why I would think just honestly stray away from these 3 kinds of tanks if you're in bronze. If you're skillful enough and positioning yourself in the correct spots and winning your fights, you will be out of bronze in no time by playing these 3 kinds of tanks.
Yeah. The light tank, its ability is not useful in bronze.
Yeah,
Um,
actually,
people
that's
people
something
people don't look at the minimap.
that's something I noticed last season when I was playing on one of my alts. Holy, you playing all 7 of them at the start, you playing them again just to remind your team, like, hey, they're all going this way, and then they still drive into them and
And
die.
then they're
So,
surprised that everybody is there.
yeah.
The
So,
bad chat is just too like
you take too much
you
damage
yeah, you probably don't have the capability to pull it off if you're
in
in
bronze.
bronze.
That's
Yeah,
true.
it's a really hard tank to play, and even most champions cannot play it well. I'll
I would
like
say, yeah, like there's many champs and legends I've seen that, like,
yeah, that just drive around
it's
and die.
and it's just a difficult tank to play and to optimize well um in this mode. So yeah, that's kind of the TLDR of bronze. If you get into those higher lobby games, and this goes for any elo, But let's say you're bronze and you get into a gold lobby. You're like at the bottom of the scoreboard when you press tab, and you're like, okay, I'm in a gold lobby. Depending on what map it is, you're gonna want to stick to the easy parts, and it's the same as if you were in gold in a legend lobby or silver in a legend lobby. You want to play more to the left on the scale, and basically play the simple tanks and rely on the fact that they have more experience than you. They're at a higher rank that they'll be able to do the more complicated things for you. Um, when we People have been talking about platooning and stuff recently, and I'm sure even at the lower elos, it's not quite as crazy. At the higher elo, you run into the same platoons over and over again, but I'm sure there's a little of a factor of that at lower elo. Um, if there's a duo against a duo and you're playing solo in this example, uh, on average, let's say you're a bronze and a gold platoon, and there's two gold platoons, they're both probably going to be relatively equal. So by you just playing your tank and filling your role and doing better than the other silvers and bronzes, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be on the winning team. I definitely have had like some of my most crazy like points games in like a few nights by playing solo while there's tons of other good players playing, because they're all like equally contributing to the win of their team on both sides just as much, but because I'm able to influence the game more than the other gold or champion player that's on the other team, then I end up being on the winning team every single time, or at least a lot more of the time, maybe 50, 60% of like 55 to 60% of the time, rather than just 52, 51, or 50 and breaking even. So playing solo, it's definitely possible and it's definitely frustrating, but if you can really recognize your role, it can definitely be one of the best ways to play this mode, especially if you don't have a great duo to play with. What about silver hockey? What would you say? I think it's more of the
I would say
same.
it's pretty much it's very similar. This I would think silver is even more dependent on what type of lobby you're in. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can see champions in silver. You can also, I
You
would
can see
imagine,
legends.
you could see irons too.
Yeah.
It's middle of the pack. Like you're gonna see everything. You've got to be kind of prepared to play every role because sometimes you will be kind of expected to kind of carry the game. If you're in an iron lobby, you're gonna be kind of almost expected to perform well and be the
Right.
win condition for your team.
That.
Whereas if you're in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
legend lobby or a champion lobby, your only job is to not be the reason your team loses.
Seen
Like
this so many
that
times.
sounds toxic, that sounds mean, but it's true. If you are able to do your job in whatever tank you're playing, you can kind of expect that the legends and the champions in your games are going to do their job too, and
Mm-hmm.
you will win because the other team, they'll have people that don't know what their job is or they don't know how to do their job.
Yeah, and the other thing is I find a lot of players, they'll also fall, like I think part of it, a lot the general population is actually pretty good at this in Onslaught, but a lot of players will just go to doing what they think they're comfortable with. But when you get into these higher elo games, you do need to adjust to what your teammates are doing. You can't just make the play that you're comfortable and used to playing and expect that to work for your team. So you do have to, as you work up the ranks, kind of adjust to what's around you and start thinking not just about what tank am I going to play and where am I going to go, but where the other 6 tanks on your team are going, and obviously the other 7 on the enemy team. That's the reason why I think if I were to put this in a tier list, I don't know. I think I might actually interchange the medium and the heavy because well, I might just be biased because I haven't played too much in silver, but I feel like silver's, because they're getting pulled into legend lobbies, I feel like you probably get a lot of gold and even like champ gold, or the rare legend games, or I don't know how I'm not 100% sure about how the matchmaking works in silver, but if you're definitely finding that you're pulling the higher ranks, then I would definitely focus on playing these categories of heavy
You
tanks more
you
than
want to
DPM
stick to
tanks.
your meatball tanks where it
Exactly.
doesn't matter if you make a mistake because you have so much HP that you're not even close to dying. If you peak and
Hmm.
you lose whatever 1,500 HP, if you're in a 430U, there's half your tank. If you're in a 62P, there's like what, a third of your tank. It's still a
Hmm.
a big mistake, but it doesn't really change the outcome of the game because you're in a 62P versus in a 430U, which has a much bigger impact on the outcome of the game.
Right. And then now when we get to gold, I would say it's still mostly the same story. Um, you're gonna want to be playing your 60 TPs, and once again, really at this point, if you're in gold, you probably will have already found some success doing what we're talking about. You should have already um, realized that, hey, I keep getting in these high elo games, and I'm not. I'm finding that me myself am dying more often than not if I'm trying to contest the offside against these players that have played more, are in different tanks that I'm not used to fighting or whatever and whatnot, and I'm starting to find my role in these games. And once again, I want to reiterate, it is 100% possible for you to hit at minimum champion just by playing solo and playing a role tank. If you don't believe it, go look at Axe Wheels. Holy. Everybody's hating on that man. That man is in champion. If you're going to tell me your games are rigged and whatnot, and Axe Wheels is in champion, then you know what? You are a lost cause. Like, bro, that guy is. He plays a
But
Panzer
we're not
7.
being toxic here, but
No, but like,
he plays the worst meatball tank and he's ranking up.
yeah. Like, that man. There's so many games where he just does not cook, but every once in a while that Panzer 7 goes crazy because he just sits there and shoots them and doesn't like try to do something crazy.
Doesn't blow up. He's
Mm-hmm.
good old reliable.
Something like that.
Unless he plays his light tank. But that's a
Yeah,
different story.
weirdly enough, he cooked last night. Not really. He just kind of
Okay,
drove around
okay.
while I went and killed them all, but
hmm
he was cooking. Um, but as we get into gold, I think this is where if you're getting those really low elo games, and by the time you hit gold, you should have a lot of experience. I would definitely say in the lower elo games, you should be looking to play an E50M, the DPM tanks, and go effectively kill them all, really, and kill the tanks on the offside. Leave your silver players and your bronze players to kind of do their thing because no offense to those who are at silver and bronze, I know there's many of you that probably do try to think about what you're doing and where you're going, but there's lots of
The
players who do
Yep.
not.
The average silver and
The
bronze
average
player,
silver and bronze
I do not
player
think does.
does what they want to do and doesn't care. Um, Same kind of hierarchy for if you're in a higher elo game, um, you would definitely want to be now playing these kind of tanks. And I think if you also pull
I
a
think you could bring in the TDs
I
here.
think we could bring in the TDs here. I agree, especially if you're in the lower elo games.
I would still stay away from the light tank and like
I
the
think
bat. Like it's a hard tank to play.
I
Like
think in once again, if you're a gold player and you're pulling lower elo, I think this is the kind of area where once again you can test if
yeah, you could start
you can
getting into
test if
the
you're good or bad at it, but it'll be very obvious to you
yeah.
whether or not you're good or bad at it. And sometimes, once again, a lot of us have biases because we have good games and whatnot. Um, but to be honest, the easiest way to tell if you're good or bad at a tank is just look at your own service record. There's been seasons where I'm like, wow, I really enjoy playing this tank, and then I look at my service record, and let's say I have an
45%.
average win rate. Yeah, let's say I have an average win rate of 55%. This tank is
No,
at
I said
50.
45.
Okay, I'm just
Oh,
that was a
but
dark
yeah,
time. Okay,
yeah,
anyways,
we're past that.
we're past that. But let's just literally look at your own service record.
Yeah,
It'll like 20
compare.
games in a TVP, and you're like, I have a 42% win rate, and my overall win rate is 50 and a half. Maybe it's not just the tank, or maybe it is just the tank. It's like it's just, or it's you with that tank. Like it's just not happening.
The
So
combination is off. Don't
experiment.
cook.
Um, but also once again, why are we playing this mode? We are playing this mode to win, and to learn. And obviously, sometimes learning means knowing what you cannot do or just what's not useful. So you might be playing a bad chat and doing a lot of damage, but you're not able to take any damage, or you know, really that's really where the other medias and heavies thrive, is they're able to kill the enemies but also not receive damage at the same time. Whereas the bat or tanks like the Foch might be trading well, but you're taking so much damage that you're not able to influence the game later on into the game. So those are just a couple of reasons why those two tanks. Once again, experiment them, but do kind of do some self-reflection and look if you simply are just not as effective as you want to be in those tanks.
I would still steer clear from the light tank at this rank.
I would too, because either you're in a champion or a legend lobby where there's much better light tank players, or you're in a silver or bronze lobby where they don't give a
Yeah,
shit about what the light
nobody
tank
cares about
is
the light
swapping.
tank spots. Yeah.
They're like, the entire team's going that way, but my tank goes here, so it doesn't matter.
hmm
So now we get into champion and legend. For those of you, I'm sure this is a lot of people's goals, and I really do think if you have the correct mentality and understand what we're talking about and do spend some time to actually think about it, it is very realistic to get champion.
I
Um,
think if you play to win every game, I think you can hit it.
yeah, and you got to
There's a difference
remember,
between playing
yes,
to win and playing to have fun.
yes. And you have to remember that sometimes playing to win means you're actually going to lose some games that you may have won if you decide to be silly, right? Everybody's like, oh, well, maybe if I was in a grill this game, I would have done so much damage. But that game's going to happen another
Yeah,
50 times this season. And
those are just outliers.
exactly. So a champion, um, definitely, I would say, because the way the
I the
matchmaking,
430U is number one here.
yeah, I don't think I haven't seen too many like full champ lobbies this season. You're always champion with legends and golds and silvers, or you're just like the champion with gold and silvers. So this is where you really should understand the mode by now, and
Yeah,
the 430U should be your bread and butter, E50M, kind of your tanks where you're exploiting mistakes that you're seeing over and over again from the
you want to be
players.
playing these high impact tanks.
Exactly. And you're exploiting the players from this area that, haven't really thought about where they're going and whatnot. And, we can talk about certain maps, but most people will have recognizable patterns about where you see silvers and bronzes going to die a lot on certain maps, right?
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to kind of take advantage of the silver and gold players if they're in, you know, pushier tanks.
Yeah,
Like
they're
a
in like a
430U,
CS.
430U
Yeah.
eats another 430U much faster
Yes.
and easier than it eats a 60 TP,
Yeah, that is true.
which is another thing.
So yeah, that's just gonna be your main tank. And at this point as well, even when you're in those high elo lobbies, um, if you're aware about how to play the offside, or you have an idea, or you're willing to listen to your legends or other champions that have a lot of experience, then you can also be taking your 430U or E50M to the offside as well. Sometimes it may still be beneficial for you to play on kind of the default positions. Like a really good example is Redshire. Redshire, a lot of people you'll see driving around the 9-0, and then there's the middle and the castle. Sometimes you look at your team, they got 3 Batchats readied up and an RHM. Maybe you play your 430U and you just go sit at the castle, hold the castle, deny the strike. It's very unlikely that a 5th tank on the offside is going to win or lose the game. At that point, your team's either going to demolish the offside or their entire team is there, in which case you would have done nothing anyway. So that's another kind of just quick example for you on how, your playstyle may still stay similar even when you're in champ. Um, Knowing how champ matchmaking is, I would actually, once again, if you've gone through gold and you've gone to champ and you look at your batch at and you're not a detriment to society in that tank, and you're willing to listen and communicate with your legends, really, I wouldn't play this when you're just the only champion. It's only really when you're in legend lobbies with other people playing the offside, then I think it's valid to play one. But you really need to keep yourself accountable, because I will let you know, and Hockey and other legends will let you know that you should not be playing that tank and it's not just because of one game, it's because over and over again we've
Yep.
noticed it.
There's
So
been a new policy implemented in Froggy.
yeah, if you're in
If you
Froggy,
play the
there's new
Batchat
lore.
and you grief, you are reservist until you ungrief,
Um,
or the end of the
so
day. We're not that mean.
yeah, I think this kind of role tanks I haven't seen a lot this season, but I think
I think it
is
goes hard.
I
Yeah.
think it could do a lot more than people are giving it. I think because of the Batchat buffs and everything, people are
I
just
think
wanting to
yeah.
play bats and medium tanks and RHMs on the offside. But I think if you have the patience and the understanding to take an I7 or a 277 and go kind of be a mini battering ram, I'm not saying drive in. You just want to take, as we're talking about the same thing as a 430U in a big heavy tank fight. You just want to take a small
Like
brunt of the first volley.
it's really hard to dig out an IS-7 too if you're
Yes,
holding that flank.
yes,
Like
yes,
it's a lot harder to dig out an IS-7 than it is to dig out a Batchat or a
yeah.
430U or something like that, right?
It's just so much harder to pen. It requires so much more time to aim at. Um, it just has, I mean, it has a slightly more HP, not a crazy amount more, but still, it definitely makes the tank it just survives way longer. So definitely one that for you guys that are already in champion, one that we don't see enough, I don't think, and one that I think you could really impact your games by, instead of trying to fight other legends in bat chats that you know are going to be great at the bat chat, try to counter them with, okay, I'm going to support my champion or legend platoon or gold platoon or whatever that are trying to play the offside by playing a heavy tank and bringing it to the offside. So that's one that I think is totally underrated. Haven't seen a lot. And then I think it goes without saying that this is still
You
crucial.
can never go
You
wrong
can never go
playing the
wrong.
60 TP.
Um,
Any map. You pick a 60 TP, you are not griefing. Well,
I think if you're in a low elo lobby and you see that everybody's already playing a heavy, right? And let's say it's a map where controlling some of the map is important. It's a hard map to just push through the main flank. Then maybe you are griefing by not playing
nah,
one of these two
a little
tanks.
bit.
But it's once again, that's something that's going to come with experience and repetition, and you're gonna realize like, okay, there's enough pubbies to sit here and hold this flank. I could have actually played a E50M and tried to hold the offside, because sometimes flanks can be really hard to push through. So it really depends what map. Like, is your overmatch actually going to allow you to break through, or is this kind of a crossfire that just never ends up getting broken because it requires the whole team to commit, and it's really hard to get your whole team to commit in Onslaught. Um, I think, yeah, I would put these. I wouldn't put. If you can play the light tank, and once again, I would say the only situation, and I'm going to put this at the very back here, is you're in a high elo lobby where the light tank will be useful. People will react off the information, and you have players that will react off their information. So let's say you have, I know for a fact, Chase and December have been playing a lot of double bat chat, right? And you're decent at light tank. You have experience using planes. You've got the right loadouts. You know where a lot of spotting lines are. You know how to control the different spotting points, how to use your light tank to deny strikes, and you have a lot of experience playing it. Then that's the only scenario where I think you should be readying up the light tank and basically using it to enable information for your players playing tanks like the Batchat or the V4 or whatever
Yeah.
to exploit openings in the game.
You want to
Yeah.
enable your offside to be able to win, like harder than they.
You never want to be just trying to solo carry the game in the light tank, because it's going to be really really hard. It's just really hard to do, and even when you do it perfectly, sometimes it's just not like a lot of times
Yeah,
it's not enough.
it's not enough.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna put this on the very end here, and then between, I guess I would probably put this in the same order here
Yeah,
too.
I think it's in the same.
But I would still say, for at this elo, because of the fact of the way the matchmaking works, I'm gonna put these three more towards this side, because you're probably always in high elo games, or you're in lower elo games where this is just gonna kill everything a lot better than any of these other selections.
Yeah, like you might think that the Batchat is the best tank to go in and like demolish the lower elo lobbies that you're in, but in reality, it's still the 430U.
Yeah.
430U, you have the armor, you have the DPM. The Bat really has a good DPM, but I don't know. You're just so squishy in the bot, and
Yeah.
then in the PvP, and in the
Okay.
CS.
Yeah. Okay. Hockey had a little vengeance from last night. He's a little salty because a bunch of champion players played, or gold players played Batchat and
Fine
then died.
Slayers played Batchats and died.
I'm not mentioning any names, Azura
Nope.
Kura. Anyway, so when we get to the Legend lobby, I think this is where really, if you're at Legend, I think it's really hard to get Legend on an A.
There's 20 people. You know what you're doing.
You should have the analysis to look at all 6 of these types of tanks and just click whichever one is the best depending on the map, your teammates, and what tanks they're in. Once you hit
And
this point, you've played so much, you should know what a lot of the teammates on your team are normally doing, especially if you are seeing other high elo teammates. You know what their general playstyle is.
it is okay to play the 60p as a legend if your teammates
Yes.
if like it's more important to
Yeah,
have a
we're
good
putting like
good
a
good
big
lineup.
green check mark here on
Yep.
playing 60TP at Legend. It is
Yep.
okay. Yes.
Yep. It's more important that your lineup is good than it is for, Bob the Silver to be in the 60TP
Yeah.
and you in the bat chat.
Yeah. One
Or
thing I've noticed, and all of the legends have kind of caught on to this, is instead of doing a 60, playing tanks like the V4 or the Blisk to play on the normal side, but then obviously have that ability to kind of break open that flank if it's needed, has been really nice and a lot of fun. Yeah, I'll have a red char game we'll watch where I kind of do that. It's a very simple example, but just to showcase kind of what happens when you decide to play the offside, or sorry, the normal side, and kind of let people drive around and play the offside, and then how letting them go around and get the information for you to make your decisions is still completely fine. But is there anything else we'd want to add to this list, or shall we get
I mean,
into
I
some
think
replays?
it's really important to realize that these aren't like set in stone. You're gonna have games where, like, if you're in champ or whatever, your teammates 7-4-3 is not gonna win the game. You need some heavy tanks in
Mm-hmm.
there at least.
Mm-hmm.
So at least a couple. So it's okay to pick a 60TP even if it's third most useful, most impactful. And same thing as if you're a silver player, you don't have to play the 60TP. You can play the 430U if you got and it's really, really, really depends on the elo of the lobby that you're in. Like if you're in a higher elo lobby, you want to stick more towards the heavy tanks. If you're In a lower elo lobby, you want to play more of the impactful tanks.
And I think the last thing to note on there that actually kind of relates to what you're saying is if you are trying to get a higher rank, right? Let's say you're silver trying to get to gold and you think you should deserve gold, then you should be able to do these things that we're talking about. You should be able to, like, how are you going to differentiate yourself from the other silver players to get to gold, right? Is by doing these things that most of them aren't doing. Um, so really, I really try to push people away from that mindset of the onslaught and randomness and just complaining about the fact their teammates are dying because it just over the season it averages out.
Yep.
There's just idiots
Everybody
dying everywhere.
has the same teams.
Yeah. So seriously, if you're able to think about this and choose the right tanks and, you know, play the best you can, you're gonna end up where you deserve to end up. But if you drive in there and you just play, you know, even if you play a 60 TP every single game, you don't look at what your team's rating up. You don't look where they're going. You just go to your position. You are gonna be far below.
You're gonna struggle.
Yeah, you're gonna be far below where you want to be and probably where you could be. So
Really important to adapt.
yeah,
Every game is different.
that is the most important thing about random onslaught. Okay.
I guess I can.
Okay, so this is the one of Hockey's replays, and you're gonna see a lot of the things we talked about. You know, what tanks his team are picking and how his thought process into the way he selects his tank and how he's gonna try and impact the game the best as possible to win.
Yeah, so with the K91 being recently buffed, it's actually not the worst tank. If you're,
we can't talk about what tanks to play for 30 minutes, and then you recommend a tank that's not even on the list, man.
It's not like I'm not recommending it. It's in the bat chat tier, guys. Anyways, I see that my team, we've got 57 heavy, Hori, 60 TP, are like, we're very light. This is obviously a map where you want to be heavier than usual, and we're not. So I have to kind of play the 60 TP here because even though in this type of lobby, I shouldn't really like. I should be playing a more impactful tank. More
Like
important that,
or,
yep, something like that. K91.
Not something like that.
It's more important that we have, you know, the correct lineup. Anyways, my TVP appeared to be wanting to go for the strike, as one does in their TVP on Suzuyansi. So I thought, you know, just go over and cover him, see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have an RHM here to plane if they get on the spotting point or something like that, so this play is obviously the only thing you really can do to try and make sure that if your teammates get repushed in the bull, that you're able to support and help trade them out.
Yep, so I'm assuming this 4K isn't going to peek because he just got spotted peeking, so you're able to come in here. Now I want to cover the south. My TVP and EBR should be able to win against the bat chat, but you know, just in case something goes wrong, I want to be in a position to, you know, at least have a shot if he drives in the open, right?
Yeah, I think another important thing to notice here is Hockey's playing in a position here that is as far forward as he should be. He's far forward enough that he's kind of spotting if the enemy team wants to make a push and punish them coming around the corner, but he's not so far forward as that he can be picked if they do try to re-aggro, because 99 times out of 100 his team should win the south in a 2v1 with a TVP EBR against a bat. So he knows that on the onside, he doesn't really need to do much except hold and win.
And this is kind of what we're talking about with the TDs are being hard to play. If you notice, the Foch B is already a one-shot. This Hori is basically dead.
And it's the same thing. It's actually exactly what we talked about. So the Foch has clipped this guy.
Yep, he got his clip and died.
Because somebody else shot him, he's down to a one-shot, but that guy's still going to be able to live, you know, potentially get at least another shot out of this game. And you can see his team's actually, like, they're up HP, but that's after, like, you know, they will win the offside here in a second, and with a free 4005.
Yeah,
so,
I'm kind of counting on my team to be able to kill the bat, because the bat on my side would be annoying in this spot. But it looks like they were able to do that. The Foch actually survived, which is pretty surprising. He's alive still. As
the
is
other
my
thing
Hori.
is, like, I'll see a lot of players in this situation go to grab a strike, but obviously recognizing the situation that your teammates are trying to fight, so therefore it's more impactful for you to just be here and help trade once the enemy is obviously, you know, shoot your teammates that are playing way too aggressively. In reality, what's the most optimal thing to happen in the situation is we play along the outside, allow our teammates to win the offside, and then, you know, fight 7v5 rather than fighting a 2v1 and a 5v5 at the same time.
Yeah, and then there, if someone was gonna get the strike, it should have been the low health tank. I'm full HP. I can't. I don't want to get the strike.
It would be our very manly drive-in Hodri player who's
Yeah,
been
and then
tanking like a champ.
you know, call it toxic. I was just recommending he don't play the Hori again.
Yeah, Hockey started presenting this video before we even made it. He was letting him know.
Yeah, he was not performing very well. I was just letting him know that I'll probably stick to the 60 TP maybe. As you can see, it's a pretty good tank. But yeah, last little bit there was just clean up.
But I think a reason why we chose these replays as well is obviously there's less scenarios where we are playing the default heavy tank, but you can see how like it's super impactful. And if he wasn't in a heavy, like his team, like if he went to the offside and there was no one sitting here doing an extra 5,000 damage into this brawl, and he was just from the offside, maybe in a bad chat doing a clip into this brawl and not contributing any armor, HP, keeping his allies alive, then it could have been a game even though your team gets a free 4,005, you know, kill a bad chat relatively for free, that the other 5 of your teammates are still completely exploding, or 4 of your teammates are just dying in the city. So that's really where it's important to sometimes just compromise and play for the team. And it really is just this simple in a lot of games, and it's just having the awareness before the game starts and before you lock in your tank to put yourself in the correct tank to win.
Yeah, I didn't make any crazy play this game. It was just 60 TP.
So I'm in here with another legend, Chapabisha, as most of you who do know him would know him as. And in this game, looking at the lineup, I'm in TeamSpeak, so me or Choppa will sometimes pretty much always play a light tank, if not sometimes even 2 of them. I would not recommend anybody doing that. It's
Don't
kind
try
of
that at
silly.
home.
But looking at our lineup, we have Udez, Batchat, Patty's on our team as well, 60 TP, but we've got this Sheridan guy, like Starry, and if any of you have played around his elo, you'll notice he either plays the Sheridan or the E4. That guy loves playing Sheridan, so in this situation, rather than trying to fight, let's say, if it's the enemy Legend platoon that's playing double Batchat with an RHM, you know, a Batchat and a Sheridan against, you know, multiple Batchats plus whatever else they bring offside, I'd rather just go look for an opportunity to change the game on the other flank of the map and kind of let the Sheridan at least waste time and stall. Because if I go and expect him to help me, I'm probably not going to get the help that I need or be able to impact the game at all. So off the first plane here, we noticed that they have a pretty default looking split. This Batchat's getting the spawning thing. The RHM's up high, so we know that there's max now 1 tank that could be 9 line, and then the RHM and the Batchat could rotate. And the other thing with the V4, which is nice, and the reason why I picked this tank at the start, is if they do push me in the castle, 60 TPs are really annoying to, like if you're in the 60, it's really annoying to fight a V4. The tank's just hard to aim at. I've got great pen, so I'm gonna pen you a lot easier than you're gonna pen me. And then obviously my armor, I can wiggle and just make it really hard for them to DPM me down, and then add it on with the fact that I've got the ability that reduces the damage I take. This tank is perfect for the castle. And obviously I'm a little more isolated, so it's harder for them to flank me. So we catch a 60 TP going into the mid here, not doing anything special. Patty's got the strike, and he's noticing that there's only 2 in the castle, and now we've also noticed that the Batchat is on the 9 line with the RHM. And my team has, once again, the Sheridan player and my platoon mate, so it's unlikely that they're going to be able to win the offside, but thankfully they've spotted that the last tank is there. So really the only other thing that could be in the castle is if that last Batchat rotated over, and the 60 TP led a little bit because my teammates were able to take the middle. We were able to push up to the castle, so now we've got all the angles to push them back and really punish them. So now I'm going to take aggression, because even if the Batchat is here, I can still just back off and fight afterwards. Here I definitely should have just killed the one-shot guy. I didn't think he was going to keep driving out. But you can see here, I'm just happy to poke and sit still, or, you know, just sit here and wiggle in my V4, because even if they do shoot at me, it's wasting so much time. I'm enabling my teammates to move up along with the 3 line, the 4 line, while the rest of the enemy team sits here in positions that eventually are going to be compromised. by us winning the castle. And once again, this is another really simple game. Like, nothing complicated at all. Anybody could do this. Um, there's nothing, like, you know, the enemy team didn't make any kind of complicated rotations that you needed to think about. We got basic information from the planes, and, you know, even if you were a gold player or a champion in my game, and you see that I'm playing a light tank and I'm playing the offside, if you count tanks correctly, and use the fact that we're probably getting very reliable information on what's on the offside, then you can make these plays and just impact the game much more than the other players here who, you know, granted we talked about 60 TPs and just playing your position being very useful, but here we've managed to exploit the default ones that they do play. But this is just a little example about the V4 and how, you know, playing one of these kind of more breakthrough tanks can be really powerful, especially when you take them to fight against 60 TPs. I know actually in the past, this V4 meta in the earlier seasons, Hockey U and Choppa started doing it when they had the old ability, because I remember vividly V4 is just YOLOing down the 8 line on Himmelsdorf.
It was great until they changed the ability and nerfed the V4.
Yep.
I won't say I got the V4 nerfed, but I got the V4 nerfed. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All you fellow V4 enjoyers.
Yeah. Anyways, that's all the replays we're gonna have today. We've got tons more, but we're getting pretty long on the length of this video. And really, I think we want to still focus on more of the basics of what we're talking about in this video. And if you guys want to see more examples, that's something we can do. Obviously, if you want some coaching, that's something we do. And then other things is you can watch people's streams and see it live every day on exactly what we're talking about. A lot of the coaches, I know Decem streams, another coach or ex-coach that used to be with us, OP, he streams him playing, and he also does this kind of thing where he tries to change it up on exactly where he's going and change the game. Who else plays? I think it's really just Decem that's been streaming. Draps plays.
Yeah.
And you'll notice in which games they actually impact the game and which games they didn't take enough of a role. Like, I will say, you know, there's sometimes where Draps opts to play a light tank or plays a drill. And unfortunately for his team in that game, it wasn't the correct pick because, you know, even though he was able to contribute, he wasn't doing what his comp needed for him to win.
Sometimes you just need that player in the 60TP. Make it all go around.
This guy just really wants to talk about his Sotionki game.
I love the 60TP. If everybody played the 60TP, it'd be great.
If you're already up 760 TPs, I've got bad news.
You win every game.
Anyways, that's going to be it from us this week. A bit of more complicated, lengthy yapping session. But please feel free to ask us questions about this. I know it's a little complicated, but I also know a lot of you love Onslaught. Next week, if you guys still want to see more Onslaught, we'll try to save more examples for you guys or dig through some of our replays. And then we can show you more examples of this kind of stuff for everybody to kind of understand and visualize what we mean when we talk about playing the correct tanks for the correct role, depending on what's on your team. Anyways, that's it from us this week. I hope you enjoy. Please vote in the Discord. Please comment if you have any questions on YouTube or Discord, either one. I read both. And then aside from that, anything else from you, Hockey Lily, that doesn't mention the 60 TP?
No, I don't have anything outside of the 60 TP, unfortunately. Yeah. 705A is also pretty good, but
any ending remarks about the K91, or I think we're gonna cut it there. We're gonna cut it there.
Underrated.
Thanks guys. We'll see you next time.